I was there and God spoke to me in my language, which was waves. I saw a picture of waves, and he captured my mind right away. And I was just, I was about 20 at the time. And so as I was looking at the waves started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And by this time, I was like a topographical map. I was now above, looking down at the continents of the world in my visual video going on in my mind. And I was seeing the waves coming into the continents, and they became waves of young people sweeping across every continent of the world. I was overwhelmed. It was way beyond the ninth wave. It was wave after wave, and then they just swept over the whole world. As God used that visual, that also is his voice.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Cultish, Entering the Kingdom of the Cults. My name is Jeremiah Roberts. I am one of the co-hosts here. I'm here joined in person by Andrew, the super sleuth of the show. It's good to see you face to face, man. I've missed you.
Yeah, I missed you too, man. It's great to be back in the studio right now, and I'm loving every second of it. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, dude. I'm loving it.
I know. I've also missed your beard, which apparently is making a comeback finally.
Yes, it's finally covering my double chin.
Yes, yeah. I know that. Thankfully, I don't ever plan on shaving my beard because I don't want to even think about what's under there. So yeah, but anyways, I'm super excited because we are finally talking about a topic that is really, I would say, long awaited. When we first came about this organization, it was by way of our series Defecting from Bethel, which came out eons and eons ago, it feels like. But we're going to go and jump into it. So what you heard there was some audio by someone named Lauren Cunningham. He was the president and founder of YWAM, which is the abbreviation for Youth with a Mission. And so we're going to unpack that today. So we are here in studio with Haley. How are you?
Hey, I'm really good. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm here with Alex. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. So just tell real quick, you both are former YWAM students, and we have some experiences we're going to unravel, but you also know each other. You're from the same area. Tell us about that just a little bit. Kind of introduce everyone to yourselves.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Minneapolis, born and raised, and Alex did as well. And we ended up going to high school together, and then went and did our YWAM together and went to college together. So we've been friends for a number of years now, and yeah, just super thankful that we could do yet another thing together.
Awesome. And so the reason why we're here is that we wanted to kind of look at the whole issue of Youth with a Mission really holistically. So and shortly we'll be doing an episode with someone who is on staff at YWAM, both was a student and was at staff at a current base. And so this is going to be one where we're going to be giving some critiques and analysis of what we've seen. And so for the most part, we don't really have a bone to pick here, except that we want to get to the bottom of what the issue is. When we made posts about YWAM Youth with a Mission, man, oh man, it was just a plethora of people kind of really, there's a lot of sort of angst, there's a lot of tension, sort of anger in the room. And so, and there's a lot of people by way of Youth with a Mission have experienced a lot of hurt, spiritual abuse, and through that, people have been reaching up to us as Cultish to cover it and wanting us to kind of label it as a cult. And so what we want to do, honestly, because we're still new to this, this is a very complex issue for sure. So if we're going to kind of look at the issues of if YWAM is a cult, if you're going to label anything a cult, or if you're going to label anyone, for example, as a false teacher, the burden of proof falls on the accuser. So I think what we could maybe just do is let's just have a conversation about what are the different areas that are cultish, and just let's just sort of unpack that, because I do see things, just given our research, that are red flags and things, it seem that could make a case towards that category. But let's definitely unpack that. So just off the get-go, we did a post a while back with Rick Allen Ross, who is a very prominent public speaker and someone who's sort of known as a public expert on cults. He gave his assessment of YWAM. If you guys aren't familiar with that, check out our social media. You'll see that post. Just off the get-go, what's your assessment of what Rick Allen Ross said in his summary of Youth with a Mission. Just let's start from there.
I mean, I think he definitely has a point. If I remember correctly, he mentioned something about it being kind of like a dynasty. And I think there's definitely a level to that, with just how involved Lauren Cunningham's family is. But at the same time, that can also just be them trying to preserve his legacy. So it could also just be, I don't want to say a family business, but they're like, Lauren had a vision from God, and then his family just making sure that it's staying within the parameters that he's kind of set.
Yeah, and that's what you saw him trying to articulating that brief audio clip talking about these breaking waves, and that was getting all the youth from all around the world to go all around the world, and not only that, but be very as cross-denominational as possible. So what were your thoughts just on that initial post as we kind of just start opening up this whole discussion as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I really saw a lot of was, well, the word problematic kind of stood out to me when I was just reading through that. I think that word in and of itself is a pretty loaded word. And it can bring about eyebrow raises, because you're like, okay, problematic is something that can imply that there's past problems and current problems. And so I think just while he was trying to articulate it, like you said, this is been a problem that's been it's been around for a long time. And I think there's been a lot of things that have happened over the last few decades. And so I think problematic is a good word to describe it. And I also, I think I think problematic. And the other part about, he mentioned decentralization and just about how he mentioned the multiple, if I'm remembering correctly, he mentioned just the multiple locations and just how big it is and how it's hard to kind of control. And I think he brought up some really good, strong arguments that even got me to think more than I have in the last few years. So.
Okay. Yeah, you read that too. What were your thoughts in it too?
Yeah, I want to reiterate too. Yeah, with regards to it being problematic, Rick Allen Ross wrote that in 1990.
Yeah,
right. So that's 30 something years ago, right? So there have been issues going on for quite some time, and it's important that these things do need to be talked about, right? Especially if your organization and the way it works comes from a vision from God. Why would there be disorder?
Right.
Is the first question.
Yeah, and so when we look at usually the definition of cult, it's always some sort of organization or just a group of people polarized either around an organization or a certain particular person, or sometimes it's both. And it's usually some sort of misrepresentation, ultimately, of the Bible, where they acknowledge that, or they basically will adhere to Christian terminology, but then they'll ultimately deny that Jesus Christ is God, come in human flesh. So, but ultimately, it's always centered around an organization or charismatic leader. So really, let's just kind of jump at the very beginning. One of the first points, because we're going to look at the infrastructure areas, and sometimes the theological aspects will interweave in between the two. So we look at Lauren Cunningham, really how YWAM was built. I'll just say for myself, I'm still new to looking into this, is that anybody with the best of intentions can be incredibly visionary. And I'm gonna be as fair as I possibly can. But just because you have a great vision and idea doesn't mean you have the proper infrastructure that's in place. So in the case of Youth with a Mission, or really anything, when I was reading Hearing the Voice of God, I was reading how it's so emotional, experiential about how he's experiencing all these different things. And it wasn't even until around page 70 there's the first time that scripture is quoted. So there'd be a red flag there. But you can have the best of intentions to where, someone says, oh, I think I'm called to ministry. God's telling me I need to go into the ministry. Well, that's great, but have you actually had other people cross-examine you to see if you meet the qualifications of an elder? Are you spiritual? Are you brand new to the faith? There's a lot of variables in play where you could have the best of intentions. Oh, I just want to go serve God and do ministry. But if you don't have proper infrastructure in place, best case scenario, there's a case for a lot of spiritual hurt.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that, Alex?
I mean, as Lauren Cunningham was talking about, he had this vision of young people going out, which, I mean, the Bible's very clear, don't let people look down on you for your youth. So that is definitely that kudos for the, like, at least the vision, the idea, like that's good. But I think that we also have to look at the cultural context of that statement in the Bible, and it was written specifically towards Timothy. And Timothy was a man who was raised his whole life with the scriptures. And so he was raised being taught these things from his youth by his mother, and he came to faith and was discipled by Paul. So it's not like he was like brand new to any of this. And also he lived in a culture where like he was expected to be a man by the age of 13. And like he was a young man, but he was expected to take on a lot of responsibilities that, people nowadays just aren't expected to take on. And I mean, for me, like it's been an interesting journey, just like growing up and be like, okay, well, so my dad died back in 2019. When he died, that was kind of like, okay, now I need to figure out what it means to be a man, because I'm the oldest guy here. I'm the oldest son. I need to figure out what it means to be a man. And so I started on this journey. And at the time, I would not have called myself a man. I probably would have only started calling myself a man like a year ago, maybe. And it's still a very young man, and I still have a long ways to go. And so because of that, it's like I have a lot to learn still. So, like, while it is true that, like, how do I put it? Like, while someone shouldn't be looked down on because of their youth, if you have a lack of experience, lack of knowledge, lack of wisdom and maturity, those are things that should be taken into account. Because someone who's, half my age could be very mature because they were raised in the faith and raised with wisdom and all these sorts of things, which I just didn't have. And so because of that, it's two very different things. Like if you send someone like that out onto a mission field, it'd be a very different thing than if you sent me out on a mission field at that age. And so I think that while, again, the idea is a good idea, we shouldn't look down on people because of their age, I think we also need to consider the fact that the young people that are raised nowadays are not trained to take the responsibilities that people in the past, in the time of Timothy, were called to take. And so therefore, I think we should be a little more cautious about sending those people out to represent Christ and all that.
Do you think, with regards to Timothy and the pastorate, so we have like elder qualifications within the pastoral epistles, do you think they would leverage a sense YWAM saying, well, these aren't pastors, so not all of these qualifications need to be met in their leaders?
I mean, I can't speak for the whole organization, but I can say that at our base, for example, that wasn't necessarily the case. I mean, I can't really think of a single time when those were mentioned or when those were given as like an example for something we should try to grow into. I mean, we basically had our leaders and we were told to respect them. And, I do respect them. I have a lot of love for them. Like, I'm not saying any of them weren't Christians. I do believe that they were all Christians. But at the same time, like, yeah, there was no mention of these as like, if you guys want to be a leader at some point, like if you guys want to stay with YWAM and be a leader, you're going to have to meet these qualifications. So like you should start really working on your maturity now to reach that. Like, that was something that was never discussed.
Okay. And just so we define terms, when we're talking about YWAM, and this is just what I'm seeing here, is that it's I see this as complex just because while usually you look at, I see the accounts of spiritual abuse, a lot of it's heartbreaking, and we want to unravel that. But when you look at Youth with a Mission as a whole, the issue is that is the decentralization, whereas a definitive cult is typically centralized around an organization or a person such as Lauren Cunningham, and so. And that's ultimately like what I see here. And just too, when we're talking about YWAM, when you talk about the base, YWAM consists of bases all around the world. And you could probably let me know this, is that what I've seen is that really a person's experience is indicative of the base that they're on. And so there can be good leaders, but there also could be bad leaders. This is one other thought that I have. I mean, I literally just pulled up on my Kindle, Hearing the Voice of God by Lauren Cunningham. And the very first thing that I highlighted was right at the very beginning, where Lauren Cunningham says, quote, "Hearing God is not all that difficult. We know the Lord. If we know the Lord, we have already heard his voice. After all, it was the inner leading that brought us to him in the first place. But we can hear his voice once and still miss his best if we don't keep on listening. After the what of guidance comes the when and the how." And so what you're kind of hearing there is sort of this very, subjective, like God's just speaking to me through every little, happenstance, where he can do that, but it's almost a very subjective experience. But somebody can sort of take a very immature person can take what they believe and be put into leadership in a very fast amount of time and use God as a catalyst to have their authority. That's what I've kind of seen a little bit. Well, give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, like you said, there are multiple bases all over the world. And some classes are bigger than others. I know our class was probably more on the smaller end that Alex and I went to. And some of them can be in the hundreds, you know? And so really, you're looking at some bases having 30 to like 50 different leaders. And sometimes there's 10 or 6 or 5, you know? But as far as like leaders go, I think, like you just mentioned, I think it can be really easy to have that whole like immaturity where you're just kind of looking around everywhere to be like, oh, is that God speaking to me? Or like having different thoughts and whatnot. And to that quote that you just quoted, I think that can be. I can definitely say, like in my experience, there were definitely times where I was like, wow, like. I feel like the Lord's telling me this and this and this through my stomach hurting or like through this. And that's not to say necessarily that I can't see him working in everything, because I think he does work everything for my good at the end of the day. But I think there were definitely times where, at least in my experience, I know, Alex, if you can relate, but there were times where something would happen to me, let's say, and I would have a leader come up to me and be like, well, this is happening because of this, or God's maybe trying to speak to you through this in this way, or and it didn't necessarily always sit right. And kind of like Alex said, I have nothing but love for my leaders. I respected them, I love them, still love them. But there were just different times where I it was almost like it just didn't sit completely right with me. And so, yeah.
Well, how so? Like, what would not sit right with you? Because I'm curious about this because really there's just a huge emphasis. I mean, his book is called Hearing the Voice of God. And a lot of times when you hear the stories that people have shared, both on our social media and elsewhere, even private messages, it seems to be always interlaced and interconnected. So could you maybe expound upon that further? Yeah,
absolutely. I'd say like one of the examples, there were some times where I felt really, I guess, alone in my DTS. There were times where I just felt like I couldn't really speak out, just to be vulnerable, I guess. And I felt alone. And it was oftentimes said to me, well, you need to trust God and you need to like be going to God. You can't be dependent on other people. And then other times it would be like, well, this is just part of the process. This is just part of the journey. Whereas like, I'm like, yes, I understand that. And of course, like I wanted to go to the Lord first. He became really my foundational piece while I was in YWAM. But at the same time, I also felt like there was something missing there. I felt like confused because I was taught about the body of Christ. I was taught that, we're supposed to carry one another's burdens and we're supposed to love one another through different circumstances. And I just didn't feel that all the time. And not that like I have that expectation, where everyone's human there. No one's, like God or perfect or anything like that. But at the same time, the things that were said to me and those kind of moments, it was like, well, you just need to trust God more. No, you just need to, you're not fully relying on him. You need to have more faith in him. Don't doubt, don't. And I think another one too, if I may add, when it came to questions, I think that one was a big one too. I didn't feel like necessarily I could always ask questions while I was there. I felt like I was being assessed anytime I would.
When you say questions, like what sort of questions are you talking about? When they're doing the curriculum, or when they're just day-to-day operations, or expand? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, kind of both. I felt like there were times where I would have like a general question about, and I know Alex, you have some things to say about this too. And so I'll finish my thought here.
You're good. Don't worry about it.
You know each other for a long time. I'm sure you're working it out. So
I know I need to take some water. But anyway, but I there would be times, like I think in both situations where I'd be like, okay, so why do we need to do this? Or like why are we doing it this way? And I think sometimes the responses were met with grace, but a lot of times it was like, well, why are you questioning my authority? Why are you questioning this? And like my heart was in a place where I was like,
How old were the people that were saying this?
Oh boy.
Ages probably range from like 20, like 26, like 23, 24 to like I mean, there's people that are like really young. If there's people that had just done their DTS the year before us, and then now they were staff.
Correct.
So like when we had gone down for a mission trip the year before, we met them as students.
Right.
And then there's other people that have been there for longer. They're in their 30s or 40s or whatever.
Yeah.
When just so everyone knows too, we're defining terms. Anyone's brand new here. When you say DTS, there's a discipleship training school. So you have the base which you're assigned to, but then you have this training school that lasts for around 6 months.
Yeah, the training school itself is 3 months, and then your outreach is like two and a half. Yeah.
And does the DTS take place at the base?
Yes, typically.
Yeah.
And then the outreach.
The training, the training part of it, and then outreach can be in the country or anywhere. Yeah.
What were some of the things that you went over during your DTS?
Wow. Yeah. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can. I want to go back a second though to the thing
that.
about the questions though, because there's two distinct examples that come to mind. There's one time where, so like, for example, there's something where Haley and I were like kind of singled out to go do something, and I was like, okay, like I will do this, but like, can you tell me why? And it was weird because in the past I had asked like, why are you saying this to me? Why are you kind of asking me to do this? And they'd just be like, like, why are you questioning my authority? Like, you need to just do what I tell you. And it seemed like they only were willing to give me an answer after I was like, okay, I will do what you say, regardless of what you tell me. But I'm just curious, like what's going on. And then also when it comes to questions, I mean, I became a Christian pretty much in YWAM. So I went down there because I wanted to know about Christianity. I wanted to know God. And so I went down there and, so I'm figuring out all this stuff for the first time. I went down there thinking Christianity was a lifestyle. Like the idea of Christianity and like the Holy Spirit working in you, transforming you, regenerating you, and bringing you to newness of life, I had no concept of that at all whatsoever. So all these doctrines, all these ideas, all these different things were like completely new to me. And there's some doctrines that I've been raised with as a kid, but like so eschatology, like the study of end times, like there's one that I was raised with, and then I'm reading the Bible, I'm like, well, this doesn't really make sense with this. And so I had a different view than them, and I was kind of like, they basically said that because of my view, I didn't have enough faith in God. Like I didn't trust God because I had a negative perspective, right? Like I was playing it safe, like, oh, in case God doesn't come through, I have this view. Whereas like, no, I just don't see this other way, and I was kind of chastised and kind of pushed away a little bit it wasn't like too long, but there was a level of like separation where I was kind of treated as like, I don't know, like not like inferior kind of.
So even though they're cross-denominational in a sense, and there should be people with different eschatological positions, does it seem like the people that, this is pure speculation, but people that are in leadership would probably more agree with Lauren Cunningham's probably perspective on the end times?
I can't speak to that. I mean, I think a lot of the stuff that we went through, I know was cultural. Like it had to do with the culture of the nation and all of that. Which I have a lot of respect for that culture and for that nation. And I've learned that, there's parts of their culture that I've adapted to myself and I apply now because I think that they do it, some things better, more biblically. But there are definitely other areas where I disagree. I don't see those in the Bible. And this is one of them where they seem to just have this kind of like obsession. They kind of took, I would say that, eschatology is almost tertiary. Like it matters, but it has no bearing at all on your salvation, as long as you believe that Jesus is coming back, like
right.
and physically. As long as you believe that, and you obviously believe in the resurrection and all the other stuff, and all the other very important doctrines.
I feel you.
Like so because of that, it's kind of like this isn't salvific in nature, but it was treated as if I was like attacking the faith and questioning the faith, and I wasn't. I was just like, I don't know when Jesus is coming back. Like this makes sense to me, and like I don't know. I'm just trying to think this through, and instead of like just walking me through it and be like, hey, like like this is important, obviously, because the Bible does talk about this. But let's let's focus on the gospel and the fundamental stuff. Like that's one thing. But that's not what they were doing. They're kind of like, oh, like you're wrong, and
And I would say leadership, just to circle back to your question, do you think that leaders would take the side of whatever Lauren Cunningham would believe? And I think each base has such a different like leadership staff that I think that question would be almost impossible to answer, because I feel like some bases really put a big emphasis on Lauren Cunningham and like his whole vision for YWAM. I would say our base really didn't. But I've talked to some people where they really took it seriously. I've talked to a lot of friends. I went to one of my churches up in Minnesota. It has a lot of DTS students, so people who did like the YWAM program. And each person had such a different experience. Even like some of my friends did it in 2006. I have a friend who did it in 2012. And each one, like, you know, has had a different experience. But to circle back to your question, I think each base has such a different leadership staff, and some of them have gone through training, some of them haven't, and some of them like have been more indoctrinized, I guess, with Lauren Cunningham's written stuff, and some of them have not. Like, it just depends on the base. I feel
depends on the director, like the director and how like I think the theology of the director has a very huge impact on the base, because I mean, you know, they're the one that's in charge. You know, they're like the one that everyone will go to talk about issues and everything like that. So they're kind of discipling the whole base. And so depending on the theological views of the lead of the director and kind of where they stand on different areas, that'll affect how the base is. So, well, you know, as Haley was mentioning, like, you know, there are going to be some bases that read more Lauren Cunningham books. We read the first one because I think that might be part of the curriculum. I don't know, like a general curriculum, but it really does depend on the base, and I'd say specifically the director and the director's view and what they want to accomplish, because different bases have different focuses.
Yeah. So bring us into the DTS, the discipleship training school. What is that like? That's a tongue twister, number one. But bring us into your experience too, specifically.
Well, did you have some?
You can go first. I'd give me a second to gather my thoughts.
We love that. I would say, yeah, so there's definitely curriculum. I feel like there's, and I tried to indulge in this a little bit more when it came to like talking with some of my friends about this matter. And I think there's, for the most part, like consistency with some of the topics, but kind of like Alex's point, the director really does, I feel like, have a big say on how their base is going to be operated. And so for us, our school had a focus. Some bases specialize in different focuses. There's sports. Some of them are focused in worship. Some of them are focused in arts. Ours was one of the arts ones. And so we learned a lot about art and like culture and dance and singing, but then
that was a lot of fun.
It was so much fun.
And there's some opportunities that I didn't take that I wish I had. When it comes to like learning to dance, like I just kind of gave up, and I was like, like I'm wet, I can't dance. I'm like, and I probably could have done it if I actually
probably
tried.
Could have. I was also too embarrassed, so I feel that. They're so good. Anyway, but yeah, so ours was also in a different language. So there was some different language barriers with that as well. But I would say, you know, the first couple of parts, like we learned about, you know, just different cultural things, dance and dance and art, like sculptural stuff at
acting
some
as well.
Yep. And then there was times where we talked about like intercession and like how to hear the voice of God. And then we would have different speakers come in from everywhere, and that would be considered a lesson. But honestly, like the first couple of weeks, we had like a couple of our leaders talk to us about like different sessions and stuff. But really, we mainly learned from like different evangelists, or we went to a lot of different, gatherings with different pastors.
And, different churches and stuff.
Yeah.
The one consistent thing that I really appreciated was every single morning, like the first thing we would do is we would get up and we'd be assigned to like a chapter in the Bible, and we tended to go like through a book at a time. Sometimes we jump around, but it tended to go like we'd read a whole book kind of in its context, and we would go chapter by chapter, and then so we'd have an hour to read it, and we'd take notes kind of on our thoughts, and then we would all gather in the classroom and we would discuss it, and that was great.
I loved that.
I mean, that's something that we even tried to keep on doing with our class afterwards. Is like we would still be getting a text message like with what the passage, and so we would all read it, and then we'd send our thoughts and everything, and that was something that was great, and especially for me, like after like just becoming a Christian, having that consistent reading the word day in, day out, and just discussing it was huge. And it's something that I am incredibly grateful for even to this day.
That's good. So quick question too. You said the words like intercession and things of that nature. What is that exactly, and how are you trained in that?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah. I have the notebook just over there with the different steps, and I am now regretting that it is not sitting in front of me. But basically, there's like 4 main steps that we really learned about. And it's like silencing different voices to really hear from God. And I remember this because it still like circles in my head today. One of them is like you have to silence your own voice in order to like hear from God. Again, this is what's taught in the school. I have it written down. The second thing, you have to silence the voice of others in your head. The third one is you have to silence the enemy's voice, and then you're ready to, I guess, receive.
Hear the voice of God.
Yeah. And like that just comes from just being like, Lord, like I really want to hear from you. It comes from that like desire to really hear from the Lord, you know, and to just be like, Lord, like I want to hear. Like it's more of like a positioning your heart type of ordeal, in my opinion. Or at least that's how I viewed it. I think the Lord really protected me from a lot of things. But.
Do you think that aspect of that's putting yourselves in those positions to hear the voice of God, that while someone could have the best of intentions, and you could tell me this, it seems like that could potentially put unnecessary burdens or restrictions on how you have to now hear the voice of God. Like hearing the voice of God is contingent upon me.
It really stressed me out. I mean, especially like, you know, like I knew nothing about Christianity. So I'm like, oh, like, you know, God is waiting he's just waiting to tell me stuff, and I just need to silence it. But the problem was, like, I would try to follow all these steps, and then I'd start having this conversation in my head, which I thought was a dialogue with God, because we were told, like, stop the monologue and start the dialogue. And so I'm just trying to, like, you know, have a dialogue with God, but then I'm realizing this is just my brain coming with some random conversation. Like, so it's not that I didn't lack the desire, you know. I'm like, God, like, infinite almighty God is going to have a conversation with me. Yes, please. You know, like, talk to me as much as like you want. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
But it ended up, you know, I had no discernment. I didn't know anything, but I was like, okay, this like, so I ended up kind of just hiding that fact, you know, like, oh, like God's not really talking to me, but I'm like, we're supposed to be talking to God. So I'm not going to even mention this because everyone else seems to be doing it, you know?
Yeah, bring us into what an intercession session looks like being in DTS. Like from my research, I've heard that there's forms of confession that has to happen in groups, right? Before you're able to hear the voice of God, you also must confess your sins before one another, right? So talk about...
So that was called Plumline Week. I actually was just talking with someone about that. And it's just kind of the idea is like, well, like what a plumb line, like it was a line used in ancient architecture where it's just a weight hanging from a rope to make sure that something is straight. And so the idea behind that is that you need to resolve past injuries, past like trauma and all that, so that you can actually move forward. Because otherwise you'll just keep on making the same mistakes. That's kind of the idea behind it. And I've heard like some bases do it differently. For us, it seemed to be more voluntary of like kind of just share this stuff. But I've also heard plenty of stories about groups where they were told they were basically forced to share incredibly just like personal and, you know, things that they just were not comfortable sharing, which that's something I think you shouldn't do, because you're forcing somebody to go against their conscience, and that's just not okay.
And in a way too, like I think the desire to share, I remember there was one specific time where we did have one of those like moments, and I kind of like felt like the Lord was like kind of highlighting something, you know, in my heart of like a past situation that occurred, and like I desired to talk to someone about it, and I can't say necessarily if it was like because you know, I just wanted to share it with someone. I am also a verbal processor, and I want to like understand things that come into my head like everyone else, I guess. But I can say that like I did feel permission to approach a leader or I guess even our director. But I can't say that I really felt forced to do anything that I didn't want to. But I also have heard really horrible situations where people were forced to share vulnerable things.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking too. Like this is how I think about it. Like if you think of Scientology, for example, there's someone called an auditor, right? And the auditor talks to this one person who is trying to get rid of engrams, which are kind of like past sins in their life, so they can actually get to the level of becoming clear so they can move forward. So what they do with the auditor is they'll go and they'll hold this thing called an e-meter, right? And they try to erase these engrams because it'll blip when something's going on. But at the same time, the Church of Scientology retains all of the records of these sins that these people have committed, right? So when I hear about this, intercession, when I've heard the bad side, right? Of course, I'm just going to talk about that because that's really what you find when you're looking it up. Is a lot of the times, like leadership, what I've heard is that they will they'll hold on to things, right? Like your leaders want to hear some of these things, and then they'll be brought back to you. You know, and that's a scary thing to me. That's a danger, I guess, is what I hear from it.
Yeah, no. If that's happening, yeah, that's an issue. I mean, thankfully we didn't experience any of that, and I credit just the grace of God and that He protected us from a lot of the worst. Because we haven't had issues, but there's people who had experiences that sounded far worse than anything we had to go through, and so I'm very grateful for God that He protected us from that. But I'm also very sorry for those who had to go through all that.
Yeah,
Right.
me too. And I think in some levels, like I can say that like some of the different things that I did share, I think it also was like a cultural thing, but it felt like because I was vulnerable, maybe that there were, and maybe it was in my own head. I guess I'm just processing out loud, but maybe that there was still like remembering of what I shared, and maybe people treated me differently a little bit, but I can't say for sure if that was a result. And I guess you can't control how people respond to what you're sharing with them. So
yeah, and just maybe you can give me your thoughts on this too. This is something you wrote down, Andrew, about. This is an experience similar to this. And again, what we're saying here, this is YWAM is very broad. There's a lot of bases, and so I feel like no matter who we brought on, it's not going to be able to address all the issues within YWAM as a whole, but hopefully we can start some conversations here. And so this is someone who gave their testimony that Andrew transcribed, and I'll also read some of it here. This person says, after the lecture delineating the steps of intercession and a 5-minute break, we regrouped in the lecture room for our first try at it. Exactly what occurred is still hazy in my mind, but I will try and explain it as best I can. I found a seat near the front and sat clutching the blue card they had handed that listed the magic formula for unlocking the secrets of God. I bowed my head and closed my eyes, and amidst the chorus of the yes lords and thank you Jesuses, I heard Jack, our director, begin to pray. After a few moments he prayed, and he said, Lord, we ask that the Holy Spirit would reveal any confessed sin. We continued in a soft voice, and I believe that he mentioned various sins, but I can't recall exactly what he said. I had focused my thoughts on God, but in the background I heard Jack encouraging, speak it out, and the next thing I knew, someone began sobbing out loudly, and someone was yelling out, Lord, forgive me. Again, Jack instructed, speak out. Eventually, the sobbing girl confessed that she had been sleeping with her boyfriend before she had left for Hawaii. She prayed for a few minutes, then several hours offered prayer for her on her behalf. Her confession was soon followed by those who also felt convicted about sins committed prior to their arrival at the DTS. They went on for several hours, and people were crying out and pleading for forgiveness, and Jack advised them to speak out. We finally broke for 1 o'clock. And just the one thing he says here, the following 2 mornings were also filled with hours of crying and confessing, and was emotionally drained. We all committed that we felt we had spent the morning engaging in grueling physical exercise. I remember feeling confused and frightened during these sessions, and guilty for not confessing everything. I shared my feelings with one of the staff members and was advised to confess my fear as sin, and I did. So I just want to this is just one example. Just give me your initial thought, because you have a lot of friends you've talked to. Just when you hear that, what comes to mind?
Unfortunately, I've heard this happen to a couple people, and in some cases, when you're doing a DTS, you're doing school with them, and you're also like living with them. So it's not just like you go home after school like you would in high school or in college. You're doing life with them as well, and that can look very different for a lot of different people. And I know for me, our class was smaller, and so we all stayed in a span of 2 different rooms. And all of us women lived together, and we did life together. And there were different times where I know, just in the privacy of our room, where we were kind of like something would happen. I just bumped that. Something would happen in the room where I just remember this one time, and it will relate to this in a second. But there was a time where I woke up in the middle of the night. It was actually one of my first months being there, and there was this giant figure in the room. Okay, it was giant. I felt it. My skin was like crawling, and we all woke up at the same time, and we prayed, and it left. But the thing that was followed was a time of confession. And it was like, well, why did that show up? And like our leaders, were trying to like kind of figure that out. I mean, obviously it's a kind of a freaky thing, but it's like, like it was a time where you do feel convicted to share. I mean, I didn't, but there were definitely times like that where something would occur and you would feel the pressure or the need to like share something that was happening.
So was it like a manifestation of unconfessed sin among the group or something? Is that what they're saying?
I think it was either that or like someone, oh, you know what? It was like, okay, let me just try to remember this correctly. I think it was like the manifest of unconfessed sin. And then it was also like someone was like, it was like something like the door was open, like kind of for someone. And it was like also like a fear tactic to try to like get us to be scared. I don't think there ever was a full clear answer, which I do appreciate. I think there was, to my leaders' credit, like there was some discernment, and I don't think they would run to conclusions, but there were times where like you would mention something like I had a lot of physical pain and it would be like, well, like, do you believe that the Lord can heal you and stuff like that? But how that relates to this, when those kind of moments would happen, I would get this like sensation like in my heart where I'm like, ooh, I feel like I should confess something. Like it felt like I needed to like get something out. Like I felt like, I don't know, I felt like I needed to share in a way. I don't know if you ever had any experiences, but I hate that it's like that's been like the consistent thing where it's like you feel like you have to. It's not necessarily being enforced, but like there's something
there's a social pressure.
Yes.
So, and this is an area why I think I would say that I can see why some people would call YWAM a cult if they experience something like this, because if they go and they read Combating Cult Mind Control by Stephen Hassan, I was telling about him last night, he really talks about what's called like undue influence. So it's not about, when you look at cult mind control, or you kind of look at the cult sociological and psychological manipulation, it's not like brainwashing, because brainwashing that entails that someone is being held against their will. What you're looking at with undue influence is more like being boiled like a frog. And so the reality is that we're having a great conversation, but if we had 10 people here in the room that were completely hostile to every single thing that we had to say, and you can label the circumstance, there would be a lot of social pressure to kind of conform, to fit in. They did a case study where someone was doing math problems in a high school setting, and they were spelling, they were doing the wrong math equation, a very simple math equation, and everyone, I think they had already had pre-planned, around 70-80% of the people were raising their hand to the wrong answer, and the people who were unbeknownst to this experiment, they're either very hesitant or it's just some of them wanted to fit in. They're just like, but when it comes to a cultish mindset, when you're in that sort of very emotional, situation where you're talking about unconfessed sin, and also, this is the Lord telling you this,
right?
That is an area where, man, you could have the best of intentions, but people can get subjected into a very emotional experience. I have a couple other thoughts. What are your guys' thoughts on this as well too? Any other?
I mean, I didn't experience any social pressure in the sense of when it comes to like confessing sin.
Yeah.
But there were definitely other situations in which I definitely did experience some social pressure. So there's one time where there was some elder or some person that came in from outside I think he's from a church or something, and he was like laying his hand on people's foreheads, and they were getting slain in the spirit, and he comes up to me and he puts his hand on my forehead, and I'm just sitting there waiting for something to happen, like hoping something would happen, and nothing did, and he actually started like to push me. I'm like, this isn't legit. But then it just happened, continuous, like it happened all the time where like all my classmates are seeming to have this awesome experience with God, and I never experienced anything like that. So there's one time where I just let him push me over, and so I just laid on the ground for like 30 minutes until my whole body went numb, just waiting, like, just Lord, please show up, wanting something to happen, and nothing ever ended up happening, And then I never told anyone that nothing happened because what am I going to say? Like, oh, you didn't have enough faith? Like, I had no idea how people would respond because everyone's having these experiences, you know, they're crying and having these wonderful times with God. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. So that was the time that I experienced social pressure at our base.
Well, like how do you differentiate between, you know, what is legitimately God moving versus just being a byproduct of suggestion and social pressure? And then all of a sudden if you end up being a byproduct of suggestion, it's almost as if God lets you down.
Yeah.
So that's an area where even with the best of intentions, the byproduct, the collateral after effect is a lot of, what I would see would be a lot of spiritual confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, there was a lot of, just with a lot of the experiences that I had down there. I mean, I guess I'll expand on this later, but there was definitely some repercussions for once I got out of YWAM that were pretty long lasting.
Yeah.
So.
And in a situation like this, I'll just say one other thing, and you guys can let me know if you have any thoughts before we move along. But just a this isn't, I don't know, it's by no means is this a direct comparison, but I think it would be important to bring up the fact that just because you have an emotional subjective experience doesn't mean it's from God. And so there's many other different cults and world religions that will have different social under a social pressure, they'll do something to do like a spiritual awakening. And so we did an episode, not by this time, I'm not sure if we'll have released it by the time we do this episode, but it was called Gods of the New Age. And we were talking about the Rajneesh that was featured in the Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country. And they were this Hindu cult that was based in Oregon. And part of what they would do, they would spend 30 minutes just sort of like shaking and convulsing, kind of like to awake their kundalini. And finally they got to this point where they would just scream and they would just unravel and just completely just let out every bit of emotion. And after that, they would sort of feel this, you know, what you call this peace and this tranquility. Euphoria.
Yeah.
That came from, 30 minutes in this sweat lodge of yelling and screaming. All of a sudden, it's just nothing but quiet.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's something when it's an experience, but doesn't mean it's from God, but also it means it could be that. It also could be something else too.
Well, yeah. I just want to add one thing. Like, there's one time, like, we're all like standing in a line and like we're praying, and one of my friends, he just like falls down and starts convulsing on the ground and be like, "Oh, he's slain in the spirit." And I was thinking, well, one of the fruit of the spirit is self-control. Like that doesn't make sense. There's no way that you can biblically argue that is from God, because losing control of your body, even if God did like manifest his Holy Spirit in you to a greater degree, then you would have greater self-control. You wouldn't lose it, because that is what the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. And so you're not going to lose control of your body.
And to that point, I remember when that happened, he didn't claim that he couldn't control it.
That's true.
That is true. So it's not like he was saying, well, no, I couldn't have helped it. He just kind of fell. And they said it was slain in the spirit and stuff, but it was like, I think I would have had my hairs like kind of stand up if they would have been like, well, no, like he can't control it, like he can't help it. That was never.
I wasn't saying you couldn't help it. The point I'm making is that like the very act of the convulsing was proof of it being slain in the spirit, and I disagree with that because self-control, like. Again, if you have a powerful manifestation of the Holy Spirit in you, your reaction is not going to be convulsion, regardless of whether you control it or not. You would not be convulsing because you would be in complete control of your body.
Yeah.
I have a quick question just on the confession situation here, or the plumb line. So was there ever times where people, are confessing things, but they're not getting good biblical, solid counseling for the sins in their lives, like getting like how you would from a pastor, essentially? Confess your sins amongst another so you can be healed. But at the same time, there's real spiritual trauma that people have faced in their life, and sometimes being forced to be vulnerable. Not all the times you're forced, but let's just say someone feels that, and they don't get the help they need, right? Is there like a part to where some people can go, well, I heard the voice of God and it hurt me?
Yeah.
I
would say like there were definitely times where like even with my classmates, I just remember some of them really struggled with, being that we were in a different culture, some of them like had some really heavy stuff that they were working through with family trauma and stuff. And I felt like because that was maybe a cultural thing, it was kind of met with like that's normal. Like it was almost like a normalizing it. And I can't say whether or not that's like a YWAM thing. I would really hope it wouldn't be, but I would say that there were times where even like when I would share things, it was more so, it wasn't necessarily like counseling. It was almost like we were good at like sharing what our different root causes were, our different like issues, but it felt like the replacement items at times were not as strong as like the root. And so it felt like, at least like when I came home, I had like thankfully some of the roots out, that I was like working through, like pride and other things that I can say were evident in my life before even YWAM. I knew that they were. I worked on it with my pastor. But I also think that some of the advice that I was given, it was more so like, oh, glory to God. And it was like more so like a push to continue to like figure out different things. But I felt like the solutions or like the things to refill us, it just wasn't enough. And I feel like that really messed with some of my classmates.
Yeah, I personally can't speak to that just because I was so new to my faith at the time that I don't remember specific things, so I can't judge how biblical they were, and I don't have memories of being able to judge them biblically because I had no biblical discernment at the time. So I have no opinion on that.
And you know the interesting is that we were doing because we spoke with a couple of different YWAM students, just former YWAM students, and also current active staff. But I know that some of the people we were talking about this area of this issue of confession, people had sort of a similar experience to what I read. But another area too, when you get into these like group confessional moments, is that I don't know. I think when it comes to confessing sins to one another, that's all a good thing. But there's parameters in which that should take place. There's also boundaries. There's levels of confession that are appropriate. And there's ones that are inappropriate. For example, the relationship with you and your wife. There's levels of confession.
Can be gossip.
Within that relationship, that's not, you wouldn't go and talk with you wouldn't confess to anyone else.
Right.
That would be problematic. In the same way, just as a whole, just a platonic mutual relationship, brother and sister in the Lord, there could be a generic, sin or whatever. But when it comes to, there are, deeper issues that are difference between what women should confess to women, what men should confess to men. And I know that as a whole, but you kind of see everything that you know about this type of confession where that could be problematic.
Yeah, especially in group stuff. I feel like, to our base's credit, they did a pretty good job of keeping it women with women, guys with guys. I feel like that's a big cultural thing though down there. So I'm thankful for that. I don't know if I just know that like I didn't feel like, actually I don't even think, other than like you, I really didn't go super deep with a lot of my guy classmates unless it was like how much I missed home and stuff. But and that's, again, like I would say is like an appropriate confessional thing, is like talking about homesickness. But I can't say that I really felt that.
So I had a different experience, mostly because there was only 2 guy leaders on the base. And so it wasn't really an option for me to be confessing or processing issues with them, because there's only 2 of them, and there was a bunch of other guys as well that needed to talk to them. And I just it wasn't an option. So there was definitely times where I was not comfortable sharing things, and so I didn't share them because I'm like, I'm not sharing this with a girl, because like this is just it's just not happening. And there's also times where I think there was things that I did share, and they just didn't really know how to handle it. And so then it was handled poorly just because they didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah. So here's another area where I see this is just complex. Like, this is complex. So we're dealing with things that are good, but they're misconstrued.
Yeah.
And I think that's capable with any organization. So when you look at a definitive cult structure, you have, usually it's a centralized organization, and usually everything in regards to the practices, the false teaching, how they carry out, how they recruit people, it all trickles down. It's all trickles down. But it seems to me, just because Lauren Cunningham's vision was to be as cross-denominational as possible, and I think I was talking with a gentleman on our Instagram, is that there's a lot of false teaching, that their infrastructure allows a lot of crazy false teaching to actually come from within. So it's a weird, you see what I'm saying? So it's a complicated mixed bag where there are issues that I see within the theology and some of the things that Lauren Cunningham says, but some of it is a byproduct of the decentralization. Hey, let's get everyone involved. All income free. Like let's get everyone on board. And that's an area that's complex.
Well, because there's a level to which denominations are useful because there's certain things that are very important convictions to you, things you want to raise your kids with. So obviously, like that's something that's important. But at the same time, we should be able to partner with other people that, as long as they agree on the fundamentals of like, of the gospel, that, we should be able to partner with that.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, there are issues that are somewhere in between, like first and secondary issues that are important, and I feel like sometimes those will be put aside when they maybe shouldn't be, for the sake of unity and just allowing, trying to be like trans-denominational or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's just something that I think we'll definitely explore more at some time. But I think that's one of the issues that I see this just again as being complex, because you see it trickling down from the top to the bottom, but also from the bottom up as far as having oops careful having a free for all as far as that goes, and so knocking over glasses and everything. But another aspect that we kind of talked about is the aspects of really like recruitment. So one of the areas, if you want to look at people will say, oh, that's a cult, is because of deceptive recruiting practices. And so I guess the question would be too, when it comes to Youth with a Mission, how is it promoted? You would say, are there areas where what's being advertised like this, oh, you're part of the chosen generation, you just want to go save the world, and you want to go and have this transcendent experience, you just want to be part of something bigger than yourself. And I get that. I've been part of mission trips where you're almost sort of chasing the spiritual euphoria and this spiritual narcotic and the spiritual high, and I've done that.
Yeah.
I've done that many a times, and I've been on mission trips that didn't go so well. And like the detrimental effect is I came out just feeling like I've been thrown through the wood chipper because I didn't get what I was looking for. So yeah, let's talk about let's unravel how people are brought in. We'll unravel part of that, and we probably got about 10 minutes for the first episode, so maybe we'll carry it over.
Did you get what you were
part
promised?
2? Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's give about 10 minutes of that. Maybe we'll carry it over into part 2.
Yeah, so I think at least we were talking about this last night a little bit. I think for us, YWAM was something that we ended up going with our school to go visit. I've heard a lot of people, I think at least in my social circles, a lot of people hear by word of mouth. And that's how they find out about it. As far as like different bases go, I mean, the website is like really kind of interesting. They have an interactive map that you can go on and select your base, and everything like that. So I think the question in line is like, is it deceptive? I've looked through the website, I've spent some time, and obviously there's a lot of pictures of youth. That's the main group of people that they're going after. I mean, it's Youth with a Mission for a reason.
Yeah.
But there's also just like a lot of people like working. In my opinion, at least from what we did on our DTS, I mean, we did go and serve people almost every single day. And like, we were going to the people and like, we were spending time in worship. That's what our rooms look like. So I would say from like a pictorial standpoint and everything, it does look like that. I would say the deceptive part lies within the, like, each base you can click on and you can like read about it. And I would say because it is it's so vast based on like what base is operating with what way and what leaders, I think your experience can be vastly different because of that aspect. And so I think in some cases, the way that bases are advertised are deceptive, because you could have a completely different experience. And I think it comes down to, what kind of leadership is in place and what kind of leaders you actually have on staff. I think it's very contingent on that. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, so for the base that we went to, like, you can't even find it on like Google Maps or anything.
We were in a dangerous neighborhood.
Oh, it was, okay. Anyway, I mean, I can zoom in without like any directions at all and find it just because I've done it so many times. But like, when my parents were trying to figure out like where to send me, they're like, "Hey, look it up and find it for us," and I couldn't find it anywhere on Apple Maps, Google Maps. Like, I couldn't find it at all. And so I ended up having to reach out to Haley, before we were even friends. Like, hey, like, do you have like the application forms? Because like I can't find them anywhere. And so then she sent them to me. But like. And when we were down there, we talked to them, and they said, like, they specifically said that for them, they wanted to do it, like, they wanted to, like, they didn't want to try to broadcast it because they wanted God to bring people to the base,
that was big.
The people that He wanted there to be there. And so the base we went to didn't do, like, there was no billboards, there was nothing, there was no, like, advertisement for that base at all. Now I know there are advertisements for YWAM. I've never received any of them, so I can't. I don't know what they're like. But when it comes to being, receiving what you're promised, I never really was promised anything because I just, I was there. I met the people. Mm-hmm. And when we were leaving, we were just, the reason I decided to go back is because we were challenged to, like, as our whole senior high school class, to just pray together. It's just as a practice. And I was like, hey, like they take their faith seriously. So that's why I went back, because it seemed like they took their faith seriously. Mm-hmm. And they do take their faith seriously. Now, I disagree in a lot of their practice, but they do take their faith seriously. Yeah. So I guess as far as it comes to, like, I guess promises, they kept up their end of the bargain. Then again, I wasn't even a Christian, so I didn't really know anything about that. Right. So, my opinion is limited because I'm not really qualified to give an opinion in a lot of this area.
But I think the main thing that I think we both can agree on, it's not necessarily, well, actually, it kind of is. On the outside of most bases, it's like youth with a mission, and then usually their slogan, to know God and to make him known, is evident there. And so I think that whole idea, I think in a way, is kind of a promise. And in some of the aspects, and this is just kind of coming to me now, I haven't thought about this, is like when you're, like, the goal is to know God and then to make him known. And so I think that in and of itself is like is a implicit expectation.
Right.
And so I think we were promised that, and I think we can expand on that another time.
Yeah, and the biggest thing too is that it's visionary versus infrastructure, mm-hmm. and that can happen even with the best of intentions, saying, hey, this is going to be, we're going to have this great transcendent experience. We're going to go and work in orphanages and just preach the gospel. It's just going to be all wonderful and it's going to be great. We're all going to love each other. But then you actually look at the infrastructure, you think about your church plant and, all that you're doing. There's times where you guys are getting each other's nerves, or there's sometimes you have to deal with a really difficult, situation. There's difficulty and there's suffering, and sometimes, it's like easy to preach the gospel and you're talking mm-hmm. about, hey, Jesus is going to give you this, this, and this, and this. And, then the Christian walk will give you love, and joy and happiness and give you fulfillment and a sense of purpose and all that. But, is there a conversation about count the cost? And all of a sudden, when the rubber hits the road and they don't have this, there's no orthodoxy or point of reference for suffering, mm-hmm. that's where a lot of people get jaded. And I've seen that a lot too in the conversation of people who have deconstructed or became an evangelical because of the disorganization. Mm-hmm. They got so jaded they didn't know, they didn't know how to process what they're going through versus what was promised. So
yeah.
Let's say our thoughts. We'll go ahead and end on that cliff note. Man, we went by so fast.
Yeah.
Went by very fast.
Wow.
But so we're going to go and wrap up here. This is our first initial conversation with Haley and Alex. Thank you guys so much for coming out here.
Yeah,
and you guys
for having us.
Yes, and you're from Minnesota, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I was starting to catch up on the Minnesota accent. I knew you were talking last night, so here's a 10.
Are we that obvious?
In the most complimentary sort of way.
I
didn't hear it at all.
Oh, okay,
really?
Sweet. Perfect.
No.
How about this? How about I talk a little? Wait, no, that's Irish. Hold on. I gotta go get my tater tot hot dish. The other day we were going to the Mall of America, and I went to go ice fishing. Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, you betcha.
There you go. Yeah. Oh yeah, you betcha. That's very Minnesotan.
That's great. Okay, so thank you all for hanging around, and we'll talk to you guys in part 2 of the conversation regarding youth with a mission, and we'll talk to you guys next time on Cultish. Talk to you next week.